today is actually something that a lot of our athletes have asked about. So I'm really excited that we're covering it. And yeah, so I'll pass on to you, Todd, to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Go around the room.
Sure, I'll give you a brief intro. So thank you. As I was saying, as people were coming on, this is a topic I love. Identity development, transition, change. Um, so I'm looking forward to this discussion. Really, I see it as a conversation. So I'm a clinical sport and performance psychologist. I've worked at the intersection of clinical and performance for about 20 years. I'm the founder of Elite Psychology Group with office. I'm actually in LA at my office here in West LA, and we have an office in Atlanta as well. Um, and I have a performance background myself, just to kind of lived experience I'll share a little bit as well. And I might reference myself as I'm talking through it. But I started running competitive when I was 10. I ran a 1 mile fun run and I won. And so instant reinforcement right there felt really great. And I started running 5Ks and 10Ks and training and having a schedule and running the 2 mile loop around my neighborhood. So I ran Junior Olympics. I ran in high school and college at the University of Georgia. And I also have a performance background. I studied classical guitar. So I studied music as an adolescent. And at Georgia, I was a music major for a while. Ultimately, I pivoted to just do psychology. When I moved to LA many years ago, a lot of my friends were artists. They were writers, musicians, actors. And so I performed improv for about 10 years throughout LA. I had an opportunity to perform at the Chicago Improv Festival, which is one of the bigger festivals for improv in the country, which is really fun. So um, this interesting background and lived experience for me of performance and clinical as well has really informed how I work with athletes and non-athletes alike. And I did want to mention too, I did work with the veteran population for a good while in a program that's kind of similar um, to Athlete Soul. It was a program called Outside the Wire, which provided mental health, housing, kind of employment supportive services to veterans transitioning out of the military from Afghanistan and Iraq. This is about 10 or so years ago. And I was a clinical director of that program. So it offered a nice kind of a smoother landing from this culture, mindset, and experience into civilian life. And so there's a lot of shared kind of connective tissue between that and how I see a lot of the offerings that Athlete Soul provides. And so that's me. So I may reference myself a little bit as we're talking through some of these concepts and terms, and and I'll end it there. And Don, maybe you go next. Yeah.
Sure. Hi, everyone. John O'Brien. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. I'm a licensed psychologist here. I had a soccer career, played professionally, the Olympics and World Cup, and played in Europe. And thought I'd get right into performance psychology. Ended up doing a little bit of that, then wanted to get my clinical degree, did that. Just stopped doing like private practice for the general public in January, where I was like, okay, I'm not doing that anymore. So I'm a little bit all over the place in terms of what I do now. I had a great conversation with Miriam earlier this week. I love that transition from sport. That's an area I'm kind of interested in, passionate about. I'm doing a social emotional learning / sports psychology program for a local soccer club, which I find really interesting. I love symbolic work. So I have a sand play room. So somehow using symbols to help people kind of express themselves, reflect on themselves, maybe gain some sort of understanding of parts of themselves they may not be attending to as much. Really kind of curious about where that can go with sports psychology. And I do have a small like sports psychology consultancy that I'm doing for individual athletes right now too. So yeah, kind of open career wise, have some things, but yeah, excited to be here and hear from people in this field and yeah, hear what people have to say.
I know, Kelsey, you're driving, but if you wanted to, let's go ahead. If you're at a place where you can do that, if not, okay, no worries. Okay, maybe Colin.
Yeah. So I am Cohen. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, also board member of Athlete Soul. Have experience working in mental health in a variety of different settings, but currently I'm actually working in wealth management in the financial psychology space. So a place where I never thought I would be in terms of working with money, but here I am. Was a competitive figure skater and competitive coach for a long time. And this community and athletes just have a very special place in my heart. And so I'm really excited to be a part of the session today. I will pass it to you, Cheyenne.
Hello, everyone. I have stumbled into this webinar. I think the universe went like, hey, I've never heard of Athlete Soul. I was doing a raw search just because I work with athletes at the university I'm at. So I'm so happy that my registration went through. I can't wait to learn more about Athlete Soul, but just to give you, I'm in Canada. So I'm in British Columbia, Canada. I work at Thompson Rivers University. I am a clinical counselor, so that's a mental health counselor here in Canada. I have my private practice, but I also work full-time at the university. It's actually the university that I played varsity basketball with way long ago. So that was my draw to come back. And I started a pilot project 2 years ago to embed a mental health counselor within the athletics program here at TRU. And it's just going really well, like exponentially. I went from 34 athletes to now, like appointments, to now seeing over 200. And because I'm embedded within the gym and the facility, it's reducing the stigma related to athletes. But John, you talked about sand tray. I do what's called neuroscience and satir in the sand tray with athletes, and it is amazing. It really allows them to connect with their right hemisphere and bring out those imagings. So maybe we need to talk. Yeah, thank you, everyone.
All right. So I guess that's it for now, it looks like. Introductions and people here. Is there anyone that's calling on the phone that's not showing? I don't think so. Okay. All right. So I just go ahead and launch into it. Yep. All right. So yeah, I'm really looking for this conversation. Just the notion of change, of transition, which I see as change, identity development, I think is a really interesting topic. I mean, we're all going through change from the time we're born to the time we're not here. And you could even say that's a transition and change too. And, you know, as I was thinking about this conversation, one of the things that I was interesting, just as an experience that I had like pre-COVID in 2018, I went to Nepal and it was an amazing experience. I don't know if has anyone ever been to Nepal before? It's like Kathmandu or anything, India. Amazing. It was fantastic. And there's UNESCO World Heritage Site there called the Pashupatinath um, temple, and I think it's a Shiva temple. It's kind of in the cosmology of Vedic philosophy, and it's kind of this intersection of all of humanity, life, death, smells, just sights, sounds. It's amazing. And the person that was giving the group I was with the tour was describing this kind of framework of God of through this lens, and G generator, O operator, D destroyer. And so GOD, generator, operator, destroyer, beginning, middle, end. So it's this cycle of beginning, middle, end at all levels, really. At the macro level, seasonal. Although I'm in LA right now, and we're in June gloom season, even though it's May. But you know, it's a model that for me that I think resonates because how I think through things starts with macro and then it goes to micro. So there's just this notion, everything has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So things are in transition cyclically, right? We're a relationship is cyclical, a job can be cyclical. We can have a dinner, there's appetizers, there's your main course, there's dessert, right? The breath, the most intimate micro thing, there's a right. So we're all playing around in change. And so I kind of wanted to just have that as a starting point on this topic of transition that we're all going through. So let's see, I'm going to share my screen here. I realize I'm not sharing it. Okay, so can everybody see this? Great. All right. So, why are we here talking about the psychological aspects of transition? Well, because it can be bumpy. It can be a time of, let's see, let me adjust this over. Profound change. There can be emotional adjustments, lifestyle changes. Um, if you've ever been on a flight, some flights can be really bumpy, some flights, not too bad. If you have a plan to deal with the bumps, it can be a better experience than if you don't. And so we're going to talk about how I see mental fitness and how kind of I frame it, helping to create a smooth transition to this period of change. And then I think I think everybody here is essentially is a mental health supporter or provider. So, this I'm kind of preaching to the choir here, if you will. And so it's a friendly environment. So some of this information you may be familiar with already, but it's maybe helpful to hear it in a different way. Maybe I'm going to present it in a new way, that hopefully can be applied, and then maybe you can apply it yourself or take it to those that you work with. And also, I should say, Cohen, you mentioned working with the population of the financial sectors, and a portion of who I work with is within kind of finance, is kind of executives, founders, startup founders, and those individuals as well. So, as I'm sure you guys all know, a lot of these same principles are going to apply across the board, right? So let's just talk about off the top here some of these psychological experiences of sport transition. And the big one that is most covered in the research out there is identity and identity shift, right? Identity change. And I'll speak for myself. When I started running at 10, it became my whole life. Like I said earlier, I started running races. I started training. The way I started thinking about diet at age 10 and 11, um, rest, recovery. It just really became the fabric of who I identified as. People in the community knew me as a runner and a fast runner, and then you get used to winning. So there's all these reinforcements that are occurring, right? And so if I get injured, if I'm not able to compete anymore, or if I retire, self-select out, that sense of self that we built around, for me, the runner or the figure skater or the soccer player or the basketball player, wait a second, who am I? So essentially, when I was in high school, I had some medical issues. And so the trajectory that I was hoping to go on, I went down, instead of going here, I went here. So I went through basically an existential crisis when I was 17, because I had there's a concept called identity foreclosure. Are you guys familiar with that notion? It's, it's basically what I just described. You double down on this one identity to the exclusion of other potential identities. And this is a naturally occurring developmental process that children, preteens and teens go through, trying on different selves. I'll maybe try out for for a sports team, or I'll go into the chess club or the math team, or maybe do some artistic things. So when we have this foreclosure, that only kind of amplifies when we do have this identity shift. And I think it can be a continuum. I think for some, it can be really, really, really difficult. And others, it can be just kind of like a pivot, soft pivot. And there's factors that we're going to talk about that can go into that. And so there's also loss of purpose. If I've been training, if I've got a community, if I've got organization, structure in my life, and I've been competing at this high level where it's basically train, ideally win, repeat. Well, without a new purpose, again, who am I? What am I going to do? Can feel depressed, can feel anxious. And so these are some of the kind of high level experiences that I know I experienced, and maybe some of you guys experienced. And so another one here, comparison and pressure. When I'm going to step down out of competition, and peers are going to continue going, there can be a little bit of a natural comparison right there, right? Um, and this can also extend beyond sport, as if we're retiring and this person goes on to another venture, say in finance, right? And they're successful there, right? So then the competitive edge might still be going and playing out, and can stir up insecurity and or regret. I mentioned it earlier, but this structure, as athletes, we have structure. We have a morning routine, we have a training day, we have recovery days, travel schedules. Everything is built around this system of organization. Essentially, we have an architecture of performance. And when we don't have this regimented routine, um, things can kind of drift and fall apart emotionally, physically. Um, and I would say, as I have indicated here, that that routine provides a physical grounding, but it also provides an emotional and cognitive sense of grounding as well, um, over time. And so when we kind of decouple from that, we can feel a bit aimless. We can feel a little bit out of tune with things. Um, if I go back to when I was competing on the team's kind of off season, I would experience this in high school and college when we wouldn't have like an organized practice, and I was very independent, and I just from the time I was 10 training by myself. But once you have that team cohesion, a little bit of off season, I remember at times kind of feeling a little bit anxious or even like kind of this low grade, like depressed of wanting that connection with my teammates, um, and wanting that structure. And so these are a handful of transitional experiences. It's not this is not exclusive. There are potentially more here, but I think these are core elements that I know I went through, and that I think maybe others could speak to. So um, I'll just kind of pause there. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions? Again, to keep this kind of as a discussion, I'm happy to, I think that would be great. And I'm watching the time too. So
I will say that so working with people around money, right? So retirement, right? That's the big thing that a lot of people are saving for. All
yeah,
of these things are present when you retire from a job, right? All of these things are present when you go through a divorce, right? Or there's just so many life transitions where all of these things that you've highlighted touch upon. And so I think it's yet again another way in which athletes are going to have a leg up, right? Because like you said, you went through an existential crisis at 15 or 16. Most people don't do that, right? And so, then when you got to transitions later in your life, you had something to compare it to, you know what I mean? So it
yeah,
wasn't completely new. And so I think that's really important to point out.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And there may have been a couple of other existential crises along the way, but it's part and parcel. But yeah. So anyone else, thoughts or comments so far? Yeah.
Um, Buddhism has a concept of mudita, sympathetic joy, where you're
Mhm.
pleased at other people's accomplishments.
Yep.
And just thinking how I don't know how present that is in the sport world. And I know for my transition, there was a lot of anger. I retired because of injury, of
Yeah.
anger about like, man, why can't I do this? And I'm better than some of these people on the field, but I'm not
Yep.
able to be there. And it took me a while, but I think some part of me grew to appreciate and enjoy other people's success, people who I knew and kind of competed against.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That all holds for me as well. In almost really going through the grief process, right? Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, and um, eh, eh, and I've gone through it several times for sport, for non-sport related things. And I think an important part for me, and I didn't mention this earlier, but is compassion and having compassion for ourselves as we're going through these changes and transitions in life at large, and specifically as we're transitioning out of sport for different reasons. I know as an athlete, I was pretty hard on myself. I think we increase our pain tolerance through training and physically, but we also, I speak for myself, did it mentally. And cognitively, would drive myself hard. And so I think I'm still working on being more compassionate for myself in all of my activities as a general practice. But I think, especially during these transition periods that we all go through, like you were saying, Cohen, absolutely, yeah. So,
I think, I think for myself, when I were working with university students, there's a natural goal that I'm going to get to my 5th year of eligibility, and that's success. And then when it's not met with those emotions of success, they're very confused. Like they don't understand how grief can also be a part of that. This year specifically, I don't know what's going on, but I've also noticed teammates for team sports. This, even though players, maybe teammates aren't transitioning out, when a key player on a team is transitioning out, and it impacts the whole. It impacts all, like their structure changes because maybe that team member was a leader, or they were maybe the ones that brought that comparison and pressure in a good way, and now they feel a bit lost. So it impacts the whole team, not just the athlete transitioning out.
yeah, that system, right? It's a system, and when you make an adjustment or change to one part, it affects all parts. Yeah. Great. Any other comments? I'll move on if not. Nope. Okay. So so let's talk about mental fitness and why it matters. And so again, I work mostly therapists here, so I think we probably naturally get this. So I define it as the ability to intentionally manage thoughts, emotions, behaviors. I don't include it here, I didn't, but it's physiological responses in a way that supports performance, optimal performance, well-being, resiliency. And this is true especially under pressure or stress. And so for the therapist in the house, you're probably seeing thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and physiological is kind of the 4 points of seemingly kind of a cognitive behavioral perspective. And so similar to physical fitness that supports the body, mental fitness strengthens the capacity to stay focused, adaptable, flexible, mentally, cognitively flexible, emotionally flexible, respond to things rather than react to things, and that takes practice. And then also to be resilient and recover from setbacks when they come up. And it's a skill set, just like going to the gym, just like training for any kind of activity. With practice, mindfulness kind of as a core component, some cognitive restructuring, adjusting thoughts, adjusting the cognitive frame, visualization, emotional regulation. So those are some kind of sports performance skills and some values-driven behavior, and we'll talk more about those in a minute. That really sets the stage to support this transition period, or any transition period. Because again, these are skills and topics that I talk with athlete and non-athlete about. And it just adjusts based on who I'm talking to and their history and their background, so that it's, in a sense, personalized to them. Yeah, any thoughts on this, the comments here? Okay. And so in terms of steps to building mental fitness, from my perspective, we need to know where we're at. We need a starting point. So we need a self-assessment. And is really done through introspection, really. Here's where I'm at in life. Okay. I'm this age, I'm this place, this is where I've been, this is where I would like to go, I think. And that entails journaling, perhaps. There are some self-assessment scales that one could take. I think working with a therapist is kind of an optimal way to do that, because you can really dig down and have a comprehensive discussion with someone who's trained to really establish a baseline. And through that, really, you're going to increase awareness, which key component, really, I think everything begins with awareness, right? And we're able to recognize patterns. And for me, I see essentially the work that I do as a therapist as helping people with pattern recognition, ultimately recognizing patterns in life. And that could be thought patterns, emotional patterns, body patterns, just patterns in general that we develop in childhood. It could be intergenerational patterns that are showing up, um, cultural, community patterns, all together, these patterns and how they influence us and drive our behaviors. And really, mindfulness to me is a core component of this. And as you know, I'm guessing everyone here has probably had some experience with mindfulness or just familiar with the term. Present moment awareness and focus in a non-judgmental way. That's kind of the John Kabat-Zinn definition, so that we begin to be more aware of how I'm carrying my body, right? When I'm talking to a lot of my clients, it's most of us are walking around like brace for impact, like this, and we're holding our breath. It's like, oh, so when we do that, it's not a really comfortable way to live. And so it's helping people see, okay, I'm living like this. I might be holding my breath. Okay, what are the thoughts that are running through my head? What are my emotions and what am I doing? Right? It's helping us reorient to all those components. And so in a nutshell, really to me, that this is building mental fitness. And then when we do this, we're able to identify the patterns that are patterning, right? Which most of the thoughts that are running through our head are just simply noise. And most of the thoughts are conditioned through our culture, through our family, through social media, and all these things coming at us, right? And so it's helpful, I think, from a practical perspective to have a filter, and the filter is developing the ability to assess thoughts in a more clear-headed way. And this maybe could be seen as taking the cognitive behavioral approach of looking at content and maybe, is this accurate thought? Is this serving me? Well, let me develop a more balanced thought here based on the evidence. Or through meditation, mindfulness, which is developing a different relationship where I'm essentially defusing or decoupling from the thoughts. The mind is the blue sky, thoughts are the clouds passing by. Thoughts can be there. I don't have to get involved with them, right? That takes practice. All of this takes practice. Again, I tell people, this is like getting the office here. My office is the mental fitness gym, just like you go to the gym to work out. And we're going to get our reps in, and it requires the reps, right? Yeah, I'll pause there. Any thoughts or questions?
I have a question, and I'm gonna ask as if I'm not a therapist, right? Just
Yeah.
because I want people recording to be able to have that information. But so as athletes, we don't often take time to stop and journal our thoughts, and where everything's just go, go, go. So
Yeah.
if I'm somebody who does not have experience with that, how would you recommend that I start with a self-assessment? If I'm not ready yet to see a therapist, what could I do? How do I start journaling? Kind of what guidance do you have around that?
Yeah, yeah, it's a great question, and I think there's almost, it's kind of like walking into Costco on a Saturday where it's like, oh my God, there's just so many options. I'm so overwhelmed. I don't know what to do. So a couple of things. One, is there's plenty of journals out there that just pick up a journal and start writing your thoughts in terms of where am I in my life right now? How am I feeling about where I'm at in my life? What are some of the goals that I want for my life right now? Yeah. There are some online assessments that are available that are really simple and easy that I can follow up and create a link to. Also something that more and more of my clients that have been doing, initially I was like, oh, that's interesting, but using ChatGPT as almost a diary and asking these questions and getting the feedback. And so you could use ChatGPT as an interface, take that information, and then take it to therapy. Actually, I have a lot of, I don't know about you guys, but I have a lot of clients that are doing that as kind of a first step for learning how to journal, getting feedback, and and then they'll bring it in and we'll talk about it. And I think it can be a helpful step for some. Yeah. And I guess actually, and for you to ask you the same question, what have you found to be helpful?
Yeah, I had not thought about Chat GPT. and not gone there yet, but so thank you for sharing that tidbit. I think it's just when I've worked with clients outside of the financial space in doing this, I've invited them to take notice, and it doesn't have to be journaling. It can be in, taking a picture. We're all walking around with our cell phones, right? Like capturing a picture of something that represents how you're feeling in that moment, and just really slowly working their way up to being silent and mindful. Because it really is a practice, and sometimes it's not fun what you notice and what you discover and what you're aware of. And so just progressing, doing a little bit every day to where you can build up kind of a tolerance for being exposed to everything that you're thinking.
Yeah, exactly. And again, being compassionate in this process, going easy on yourself, and because learning something new, something novel, it's uncomfortable, changing. As a runner, to run slow, to like do a slow run is like, it seems simple, but it's like, no, you're going to run slower today because you know why you need to run slow. But to actually do that takes having compassion for it's an act of compassion, actually. And so the same thing as we're learning new skills and pivoting into new directions is to carry that with it. Yeah. Okay. So let's go on. So one thing that to kind of go in this continue with tools for building mental fitness and transition. So I think goal setting is important. We're used to it as athletes. It's something that's built into our model of performance. And I think a really important component of this work of mental fitness is a values assessment. And this is something that I pretty much talk to everybody about when we're initially meeting. Um, Values. What's important to me at this point in my life? Values can change. They can iterate. And so this is part of the self-assessment. What's important to me? And there's different ways to identify values. There's values checklists, and those can be helpful. There's one in a book that I referenced at the end of the slides here, from Brad Stulberg, and his book Mastery of Change. At the back of that, he's got a really good list of values that I recommend for people. But it's good to have about 3 to 5 values, and he talks about this in his book, as anchors that help us in the inherent nature of life when things go up and down and when we're challenged. These values keep us grounded and keep us focused and help reduce anxiety, such that once the storm passes, okay, we have clarity again. So, and for me, just to share values that are important are wellness. And so wellness to me is emotional wellness, social wellness, health, financial, spiritual. I would also add maybe learning in there. For some people, spiritual doesn't matter, no problem. But these are just 5 or 6 values for me that I anchor on, and come back to, and so it kind of is mine. Those are give me direction in life, right? Because it's really the values help us establish a roadmap to where we're going, because then we can be more clear on our goals. I mean, it's nice to take a road trip and just kind of drive, but if you're going to go to the Grand Canyon, you need to know the directions, right? So the values help lead to goals, and that creates a map. And then we can start to begin to lay out a model for short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals. And as athletes, we're all fairly familiar with, periodization training cycles. And so we begin to have more clarity in terms of next steps. And again, this is all information that we know, that's part and parcel, to us as athletes, that we can expand beyond the sport, right? And then to continue on, kind of to rehash what I was saying in the last deck, supporting resilience and stress management, we've got mindfulness, cognitive reframing, self-talk, visualization, relaxation training. These are all mental performance skills that I think most athletes are familiar with, kind of core components that we practice ideally kind of every day as an athlete, but also as you don't have to be an athlete. These are beneficial to be practicing and implementing kind of for everybody. Self-talk that's supportive, that's encouraging, that's instructive. I often say, like, if you can't see yourself being successful, then it's going to be hard to be successful in whatever success means for you. And relaxation training, mindfulness, having the nervous system downregulated so we're not living tense, kind of in a brace for impact way, right? Because when we're living like this, we don't have all of our cognitive emotional resources, right? We're kind of in this sub-threshold fight or flight or freeze model of life. That's not a fun way to live. So more grounded through mindfulness, through self-talk, through relaxation training. We develop what Brad Stulberg in his book describes as a rugged flexibility. Rugged in the sense of I'm grounded, I'm strong in a sense of who I am and my values, but I can be flexible emotionally, cognitively. I've got emotional resilience so that when stressors come up, I can bend and I don't break. And and John mentioned a Buddhist term earlier. So this term equanimity, right? Sense of bending but not breaking. The storm is raging, and I stand in it, and I'm okay. And so that's a really, I like that term, and I think it encapsulates what we're talking about with mental fitness really nicely. So also part of rebuilding structure and identity involves creating new routines and rituals from the ones that we've had in the past, and connecting with new communities. Really important aspect. Community, others is very, very important. And so this gives us an opportunity to draft a new script, and create new interests, to expand our identity, to try new things, to play. One of the I don't know if you guys have ever done improv, but I recommend it to everybody. It's fantastic, especially if someone has a fear of public speaking or just kind of, social anxiety. It's amazing. But it's all about play and getting into a play mindset. And when we're in a play mindset, there's not really fear. We're present. One of the really, it's not really a rule per se, but kind of principles of improv is yes and. The principle of yes and. And it's a life principle, really. And when you're doing a two-person scene with someone, you want to yes and them because you're getting their back and they're going to get your back. So if you say like, hey, that's a great new, I love your office today. I love the architecture behind there that you have. Oh, great. Yeah, thanks. And I like your painting or whatever. That's cool. That's building a scene. That's building a relationship versus, oh, I like your background there. Oh, it's okay. I'm thinking about getting rid of it. It's like, okay. This kind of ends the scene, right? So yes, anding. And I give you this as an example of this is a great way to create new community by playing and maybe trying improv. So I'll pause there. Any thoughts or comments? All right. Okay, so this next couple of slides are about it's called the inside out model to mental fitness. And I'll talk through this, and again, you're probably kind of familiar with this, but it's a model that's rooted in inner self-worth versus externalized self-worth. It incorporates more of a growth mindset and sees the transition as a training phase, not necessarily retirement out of sport, if you will. And it incorporates self-awareness, compassion, and adaptability. And so essentially, and I'm going to start inside out and then go or outside in and then go inside out. So an outside in model builds identity based on external validations, right? Outcomes. We've got, and really this starts in school, and our educational system is kind of the instigator of this, but we've got grades, we've got trophies, rankings, salary, acknowledgement, right? And you feel good enough because of this achievement. or how others see us, teachers, significant others in life, or the status that we hold, right? And so it's very externalized, it's very outcome oriented, and it can work. It can work. I've got a couple of older analog clocks here. But a broken clock is correct twice a day. It doesn't mean it works, right? So it works until it doesn't work. There's a lot of tension and anxiety and stress built into this model. So when the structure of competition falls away, graduation, injury, or retirement, these external sources of validation go away. And so without those, if I've built this model around that, the self-worth can feel hollow and stable, and we can feel lost. Yeah. Can lead to identity confusion, like we've talked about, increase in anxiety, even depression symptoms, can feel amotivational. I don't really feel flat. And then can lead to just a sense of low motivation to find new pursuits. So it leaves us really vulnerable emotionally when this external scaffolding shifts or disappears. Now, if we go inside out, so this is a model that's based on intrinsic, internal qualities, and really important that for me is the sense of I am lovable, I am worthy, I am capable, I'm enough before anything else. Growth, achievement, all these things can be important, but they're expressions of who I am. They're not conditions for me being enough. Before all of those things, I'm good, I'm okay. Yeah. And so some features around this is self-worth is unconditional. My success can enhance my life, but it doesn't define who I am. It doesn't define my worth. I'm okay. Comparison is internal. I'm measuring myself against myself over time, not necessarily others. I'm aware of others. I'm not going to not acknowledge that, but I'm anchored on myself. So there's this intrinsic motivation that's driving my pursuits. I love the process. I love the challenge. Like this personal evolution. And there's a term I'm going to mispronounce, but I think it's edumania, but you're doing something for the sense of doing it. And it's got this mastery orientation of building on skills and self-expression rather than anchoring on outcomes. So you can kind of comparing this to the outside in, you can see it's going to have a more resilient mental fitness across different life phases, especially during periods of transition. So questions, thoughts, or comments on that?
Hi, Todd. Yeah. I love this. This is great. I wanted to go back to something you said earlier. I wasn't able to jump in. Regarding the yes and,
Yeah.
I'm gonna not yes and something. The play, I get that, the looseness, play, being in that space, great. I guess my experience as a team soccer player,
Yeah.
one thing I think I noticed from athletes as they transition from like that team dynamic to kind of sorting out themselves individually in career afterwards is maybe not sometimes going along with the group thing and not really being in touch with a no, or like that doesn't work for me. I noticed it in groups where, these team athletes have kind of gone on, like, that there's being used to like giving up your own needs for that team dynamic. Whereas
Yeah.
psychologically, it's felt like sometimes, I've had like people have had to learn or teach them to say no, and what really matters to you, and how do you say that respectfully?
Yeah.
No, I want to do this and move
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
So I guess I worry sometimes with that yes and that people who have a tendency towards maybe pleasing others or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That might not be the best instruction for them sometimes in group dynamics.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, and it's because it is nuanced. It's not kind of a one size fits all, and I think one of the things you're talking about too is a boundary, for an individual, and knowing what's right for them and what's not right for them, and not, if I'm hearing you correctly, and kind of not kind of in a sense playing someone else's game. I need to play my game. Is that kind
Yeah.
of, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that goes to this process of knowing, really, who am I? Kind of this existential process of who am I? And that's essentially, kind of what we're talking about through that assessment. And I think and I mentioned the yes and just kind of as an aside. And I think it's kind of it's a model that I think is helpful to take on in the sense of we're not saying you don't have boundaries and there aren't times when you say no. Absolutely. 100%, you know, and in having that sense of knowing when to say yes and then also knowing when, and actually you said, I'm going to know you, but there's a higher level yes and, which is actually a no and, which then becomes a yes and. So, yeah.
Right. Yeah. Still having connection even amongst disagreement.
Yeah.
Right. Still being able to do
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, but I'm glad that you brought that up because that's important to really, there are times when, well, I think everybody is benefited when they're on their, because really we're talking about your journey, your path. And there are going to be similarities, but you're on yours, I'm on mine. And there are going to be some things that look similar, but things that look very different. Yeah.
Thanks.
Right. One thing I wanted to ask you that we have seen more and more in the entry assessment of the athletes that go through our program is they're in the section where we ask them, do they feel more than an athlete, and they feel kind of comfortable as a human being. They have to like rate on a scale, and we see really high scores, perhaps compared to in the past. That has evolved in a positive way where the athletes are now considering themselves as more than athletes. But then the next question goes to, do you feel confident in environment outside of sport? And then the score is very low, and it remains very low. And so I found it really interesting that the first one has really evolved positively, but it's not transferring quite yet.
And I'm curious in terms of what's the time frame? Is there a period of time so they can, basically get their sea legs and work on?
So these two questions are actually part of our entry assessment. So they come actually in the questionnaire, they come back to back. And I find like we used to have lower score on, do you feel more than an athlete? And so those two were typically fairly low, and now one has gone up and the other one is still low. And it's sort of feel like there's this better awareness and knowledge of yourself and your value as a person, but not necessarily knowing how to use that to build your confidence in environments that are not your sport. I'm just curious if you have seen similar things.
Yes. And I think there's a there's a lag time. It's interesting because you can, yes, in one sense it's like, well, wait, how does that doesn't make sense. But I think you can have that sense of, okay, I'm trying on this new identity, but it takes time for it to really kind of catch up. And it's getting more reps, and there's a lag time, because when we're going out of one environment and into the next, there's that period of time where it's novel, it's new, it's uncertain, and maybe I've got a little bit more anxiety, but to use a therapy term, we habituate, we get used to it, and then we ease in, and then in that stream, and I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable. But I think helping people understand that that's natural and that's normal and it takes time. And that's where having compassion for yourself and trusting the process and trusting yourself in the process is really important. Yeah. Does that make sense? Does it kind of, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, all right. So I'm watching the clock here. I know we've got about 10 minutes. So if we go back to the slide we had earlier at the beginning, to kind of look at, okay, what can we do now that we've got some of these mental fitness strategies and skills? And so some of this is kind of a summary of what we talked about, but identity shift. Well, let's develop diverse identities. Let's try on new things. Let's kind of let's leap before we look, in a sense, and trust the process. We utilize our current skill set that we've been developing over years and maybe adjust those into new skills in new contexts and with new communities, right? Um, and and that's where I kind of earlier was referencing kind of have a playful inner attitude about that, I think is always good. Having a light, playful, kind of childlike attitude, which really gets trained out of us after about age 6 or 7, then we have a job and we have to get good grades. But if we can return to that playfulness of childhood, we're really better served by it. Obviously, it doesn't mean we act like, kids at work and in the world, but it's an inner attitude that can help open up things and create opportunities that we may not see otherwise because, have to live in this lane. And so loss of purpose, well, we can do a purpose transfer where we can take new skills to new opportunities. And we can experiment with or play with some new skills in these new areas, and that's kind of what reconstruction is. We can integrate some of our athletic values into new areas, in new work areas. Comparison and pressure, kind of that component. Well, having an adjusted timeline in terms of understanding that sports has a specific trajectory. It may be similar to business, it may not. So there can be a different expectancy of timelines when we're transitioning from sport to business, let's just say. Things may happen on a similar timeline, they may not. Also, just redefining what success is, maybe moving away from outcomes to more values-driven success. And rewriting the narrative based on values, based on exploration, based on play. Also, with a loss of routine and structure, well, it's really about building new structures and new routines that can be similar, but maybe not the exact as they were when I was competing. And it could mean developing new morning routine schedules where you had a certain wake up time and maybe it's a little bit different now. And instead of working out, maybe it's replaced with meditation, or maybe it's replaced with a walk. And so just kind of reorganizing your routine, and it can iterate and change over the course of time as you're transitioning out of sport. So the last couple of slides here, transition is a process. It's not an endpoint. It's an evolution. And I don't think, to me, it's not a loss. It's an ongoing process of change. And our identity is bigger than our sport. Again, going from inside out versus outside in. Worth is not defined by achievement, period. That's a really difficult one because of our culture and how we're trained. But it's a really important one. And it doesn't take away the fact that I can still train at a very high level. I can still have my goal to win or perform or excel. That still remains. It's just my pathway to that can be a lot more enjoyable than the other pathway. Mental fitness is similar to physical fitness. Just like we train the body, we train the mind. We get our mental fitness reps in through journaling, through meditation, through therapy, through reading books on these topics. And structure and purpose drive success beyond competition. So kind of this last point, a structured routine and clear goals and strong support systems are key to thriving after sport. And so I don't know if you remember Mr. Walt Whitman, his poem, Song of Myself, a famous poem within the book, The Leaves of Grass. So I'm going way back to English lit, way back in high school or college. But I'm not going to read through the whole poem here, but there's this line: do I contradict myself? Very well, then, I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. I've always loved this quote because there's so much in that. And I think it really gets at the crux of what I wanted to say today, and hopefully that you all take away, is that, you know, we're bigger than one thing. We're bigger than sport. We're bigger than a job. I'm bigger than my name. You know, there's a universe within us, and I think it's helpful to understand that and see that and live that way. And I think taking that and understanding that, and if you take it on, it helps to move through the stages of life, the ups and downs of life, and enjoy the ride that we're all on. And again, and have compassion for ourselves as we move through the ups and downs and challenges that we all face. So that's it. I have a couple of slides here at the end, a couple of resources. These are a few books that I think are really helpful for kind of what we're talking about, and they're written more for a general audience. I've got the last slide here is some more kind of research based articles. The last one here is from Dr. Zimmett in terms of the athlete transition study. I wanted to mention that one because I know he did a presentation back in the fall. But Life is in the Transitions, Mastering Change at Any Age. This one is great. It's a lot of good information in there. Master of Change by Brad Stulberg. I referenced a few things there. A Path with Heart, Jack Kornfield, is a beautiful book. If you know who he is, he's he's a psychologist, meditation teacher. He's been around for, oh God, 50 or so years. A lot of beautiful books, wonderful writer. And then Michael Gervais, The First Rule of Mastery, Stop Worrying About What Other People Think of You. That's a good one. He's a sports psychologist based here in LA. So I think, you know, if you were going to, if I was going to recommend books to clients, which I do, these are some that kind of my go-tos that are kind of easy reading, very accessible, that have a lot of good information in them. And that's it.
Thank you, Todd. Thanks for the reference to Dan. He's actually one of our advisor board member, and we're working closely with him at the moment, developing a specific assessment tool. So there you go. That was quite relevant. Will you be able to share these resources with me so I can also share in our repost?
Yes.
I know a lot of our coaches and mentors and others want to dive in further, so that would be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Any final questions, thoughts, or comments?
Thank you. I really enjoyed everything that you shared. I love the outside in and the inside out model. And again, I just see how this is all applicable to throughout life, not just for athletes. Again, athletes are going to be so well prepared for later in life. They might not realize it right now, but they really will be. So thank you for this.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Todd. I appreciate all of you for joining us for the live version of the call. We will be doing a repost on our Mighty Network platform for our members, and I'll be sharing these with our current athletes in our program too. So yeah, I appreciate your time, Todd. Thank you for this hour, and yeah, have a lovely weekend, you all. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Todd.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.